Perhaps we should talk about some of the points you want to discuss, John, in regards to thinking about the ethics behind decision making. I think they'd be useful to explore.
Yeah. I think one of the areas that I think to me is quite interesting, and it's not necessarily something that I think health practitioners necessarily think about too much, but is the philosophical sort of ethical position that you take when you're actually gathering knowledge and what kind of approach you're using. And one of the areas that I think is interesting is the difference between, say, utilitarianism, which is that the outcome justifies the means of getting there, versus the deontological approach, which is that each action on itself should be, say, potentially judged on a moral standard. And if it's in a healthcare setting, it's interesting because I always think back to sport. If it's a grand final, people will almost do anything to play, even if it's not the best medical decision. People will have local injections, all those kind of things.
Or you take someone out on the ground in the first quarter.
Exactly.
Your team can win.
Exactly. But we're not necessarily thinking about, okay, is this for the greater good, or is this, this action in itself the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do? And it's not something that maybe is going to be forefront of mind, but I think it's something in the legal world does actually become very relevant to how you or at least underpins how you guys think about formulating position. And I don't know whether you think about this stuff or not, but I'd be interested to know whether you actually, either of you, have kind of come across these kind of thoughts as you've been developing your ideal position on something.
Well, we're never allowed to work on the basis that the end justifies the means.
Yeah.
So we've got a very strong ethical underpinning.
Is there something that like, I know that you talk about this a lot in even your basic studies. How much time you spent going through the underlying ethics and philosophy of what you're doing?
Well, it's always there and it's always repeated. So as part of our continuing professional development, we have to do some sort of ethics component every year, and the bar has an ethics committee. So if people run into a situation where they feel that they might have a conflict of interest, or there's a conflict between their duty to the court and their duty to the client, then they can actually seek some assistance and a ruling about the best way to proceed in that situation. So the ethics of what we do is taken very seriously. Because
I think it's interesting, and I think both of you would come to these different positions. I think for you, Colin, it's probably more apparent because I know that you work in criminal defence. And for you, I feel like there would be ethical considerations that you have to make all the time. Obviously, everyone is entitled under law to a fair application of the law, even if we use a hypothetical example, they are guilty and they've actually committed the crime. Everyone deserves their day in court, as they say. As a legal professional, how do you wrestle with that? Is it something that you consider, or are there underpinnings for you, even philosophically or in your value system, that mean that you value them actually having the representation at the right level to justify, representing someone who potentially is guilty?
Potential is the key word there. So I agree with Helen. I mean, our role in the courts and for clients is highly regulated ethically. Not so much regulated, but the ethics are really very important. And so all barristers, their first duty, their primary duty is to the court.
Yep.
Over and above their duty to their
and
client.
when you say that, what are the things that you're having to uphold in order to actually maintain that?
Honesty, basically, with the court. So if your client says to you, in my situation, if my client said to me, I'm guilty, I did this thing, but I want you to plead not guilty, I can do that. But I can't say anything that contradicts their guilt in court. So say, for instance, it's an assault and they say, yeah, I did hit him, but I want to plead not guilty. I can't say to a witness, he was never there, you're lying about him hitting you. I can't do that because I know that he did, and I would be being dishonest with the court.
Yep.
So in those circumstances, there's very little that a defence barrister can do if they know that their client's guilty. You almost have to not say anything, depending on the parameters. And that's,
at the end of the day, it shifts to, because the Crown has the burden of proving guilt. So at the end of the day, you're left attacking the weaknesses in their case.
without pretending that you weren't there or that you've got an alibi. Or
I think